Okay, next up is the tail rotor. Now, on mine, the grips were just placed on the hub. Okay, so you can disassemble that. The radial bearings are already in the grips, but we do need to do the thrust bearings and use the thrust washers. So the way this works is, and I've shown this a million times on several builds, is you're going to want to put the thrust washer down in the grip now because it goes between the radial bearing and the thrust bearing. Alright, so let's take out a set of thrust bearings. I'm not going to go into as much detail as I've done because I've shown this how to do thrust bearings a million times. So anyway, as usual, every thrust bearing has a grooved side that the bearings ride in, alright? And there's two sides. One side fits tight and one side fits loose. So find your loose side, okay, that's your loose side. Find your tight side, okay, as you can see, that one hardly has any wobble at all. Now, let me just double check, make sure they're putting them in the same way everybody else is. And yes, they are. So the way this works is you want the loose one to go on and down in the grip first. So let me make sure I put the thrust, which one I put the thrust washer in. And that's it. So you don't want to mess this up. So washer, and let's make sure we got the loose one again. Don't make a mistake. Okay, and this one's going to go. Now what I like to do is just go ahead and put it on a tool and drop it in so that the groove is facing up and you can see the groove that the bearing's going to ride in. Alright, get it seated down in there. Then what you're going to do is go ahead, and this is the open face of the bearing and this is the closed face. Pack this with grease. What I like to do is spread some grease in there, squeeze, gets the grease in the balls. Now what I like to do is put the open face down into the grip facing that race so that the closed face is facing out. Centrifugal force, this helps to keep the grease from being flung directly out of that open face. Then of course put this one with the groove side down this time because the balls are going to ride in there. Alright, and go ahead and do that. So go ahead and lube up your thrust bearings, get them all in there. Remember, it's important. Loose one goes on first, tight one goes on last, and then go ahead and your washer and your screw. Don't forget the Loctite. Now again, something super important here. Apply the Loctite and clean it up. Just leave it in the thread so when you tighten this down, Loctite doesn't squeegee out and mess up your thrust bearings. Okay, so let's go ahead and get both grips on the hub. We'll come back and continue. By the way, one more little tip is go ahead and clean the holes out with alcohol, acetone, whatever. Get any grease out of there so that the Loctite for this does its job. I've seen so many guys throw grips due to either not double checking that Loctite or not cleaning their hardware, the screw and the hub, and then wind up having the screw back out and throw a grip. Okay, so real quick, I'll just go ahead and tighten this up. Also, don't over torque these screws. Okay, tighten them up, but don't over torque them because you can actually stretch the bolt and weaken it. Okay, when you're all done, make sure this is nice and smooth. No in and out play. Maybe you didn't get the washer in there or your bearings weren't seated. There should be no in and out play and you should have been able to tighten that screw up all the way. Okay, so just a couple more tips. Get your other grip on. We'll continue on. Okay, tail rotor's done. Again, make sure they're not notchy feeling, smooth, etc., etc. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and take the set screw that came in the kit, get some Loctite on it. Okay, alright, you'll notice there's a flat spot on the shaft, and what I like to do is just start the screw. Okay, not all the way so it's interfering with putting it on the shaft. Then go ahead and get it lined up, and then what I like to do is just lightly snug up the screw, and let's double check that we're in our flat spot. A little too tight there. Okay, you should be able to move it in and out a little bit on the flat spot, and you should be able to hold the gear and not rotate the hub. You know you're on the flat spot, but as you can see I'm getting some wobble because the screw's slightly loose. That makes sure you know you're seated on there. Now what I'm going to do is, if you see you can bias a little bit. I'm going to bias the tail rotor out toward the end of the shaft, okay, and then go ahead at this point and tighten up the screw. Alright. There we go. Now as you see, my shaft is almost flush with the hub because I'm biased outward. Alright, so we're getting pretty close to being done. Now, this is a leading edge control tail. Okay, this is the way the rotor would be facing you if you're standing on the right side of the helicopter. And when I rotate it, it always rotates up into the downwash. Here's the boom coming out here. So it always rotate the blades up into the downwash of the main rotor, like this. So if you're facing straight at it, it's turning counterclockwise. All right, so now what we need to do is make sure we put these on our arms correctly. So this is leading edge control. What that means is this control arm is going to be in relation, when I go ahead and put a blade on here, is going to be in relation to the leading edge of that tail blade. Remember, it turns up. So make sure you don't flip your grips. But anyway, we're going to line that up. Take 2 of the long screws. Again, don't forget the Loctite, and put these both in here and get that built. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll come back and continue. Okay, there we have it. At this point, double check your slider. Make sure that is free as can be. If you did everything right, you got the grips so they were free and all these joints so they were moving free and everything aligned, this should be super free, and I haven't even put any oil on the shaft and the slider. You see that? Okay, so again, we got leading edge control. We can go ahead and put our blades on, and what I mean by leading edge control, as I said, it's going to rotate this way. There's the leading edge of our blade, leading edge of our grip. Make sure you don't have those accidentally flipped. All right, since this isn't a belt drive, you can't get a belt twist and get this rotating the wrong way, so you got to make sure you've assembled it right. Okay, take your 2 bolts, 2 nuts, put those on. Then in this bag here that I skipped in the beginning part, we've got 2 washers, 2 screws. Go ahead, put your fin on next. Okay, right here with those 2 screws, pretty straightforward. And this last big screw is going to be your for when you clamp it on the boom. For now, just go ahead and put that in finger tight so you don't lose it. And that's going to complete the tail assembly. So go ahead, finish those, put your blades on, put your fin on, and we'll continue on.